Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads here on Facebook. It's Jem with you today. I'm calling you from the UK, right slap bang in the middle, and we've had sunshine today, albeit a little bit chilly. How are you doing? What have you been up to? I understand if you're on the East Coast it's about noontime, although I believe daylight saving kicks in this weekend. It's another 2 weeks for us in the UK until that kicks in, so I've no idea what time it is anywhere, if I'm perfectly honest with you. Anyway, it is my absolute pleasure to join you today here at Jessie James with the most sunshiny bead mini mix I could possibly think of. Today we're working with Lemon Yellow Sun, a mini mix which promises and absolutely 100% delivers. Can I take you down to the board just to have a look at some of the beads for a minute, because they're so sunshiny and spring-like and vibrant that I just really want you to feel the warmth of the sun that I've been feeling today, with the beads at least. So this is our beautiful bead mini mix in Lemon Yellow Sun. An absolutely gorgeous collection. You've got two different types of tassel. There's a suede or suedette. There's these absolutely gorgeous metallic thread tassels. You've also got a smattering of these little smashers, which are the most wonderful captured crystal. Whoops. That just about sums up my day. So you can see you have the collet point of the crystal on this side, and then you've got a table facet on this side. They are incredibly sparkly and beautiful, but the whole blend is vivacious and exciting and gorgeous. It's dripping with gold as well. Really, really beautiful. Do you know what? I was looking for that bead cap earlier and I couldn't find it, so I'm going to swipe that right now whilst you have a look at the thing that we're going to make together today, which is this fantasy pendant. A really lovely piece which looks a little bit more complicated than it actually is. We've got a couple of basic techniques which you may have seen before, which is a double-ended wrapped loop connector segment, and you can use whichever of those beautiful tassels you want to work with. Beads in any order you choose. Obviously you can take this and make it your very, very own. You've got some sumptuous gold colour beads in there as well, this gorgeous spacer with the dark undercolour to it. This absolutely magnificent drop as well is going to feature prominently in the design, and I'm going to show you this as well as your little double wrapped loop connectors. We're going to have a look at a couple of really useful techniques. Let me get that lid out of the way so it doesn't glare in your eyes. Multiple techniques in a piece that will make up quicker than you think it might be possible. So this is kind of a chandelier design. You may have had chandelier components before when you're making earrings. So that's a little treasure that we're going to work up together today, and also an interesting way that you can add a little bit more detail to your beads on wire by adding a little plain halo around the top. So I'm going to pop the piece back down now, and we'll have a look at a handful more of those beads. Let's just pop that over to one side. These are some of the beads that we're going to be using today from my other pot of delicious, joyful beads. You can see what I mean by Lemon Yellow Sun being exactly what it says on the tin. It really does just show spring is on its way. Spring is most definitely on its way. So I'm just going to try and hook into the live comments to see if there's any way I can catch up with you. Sometimes I'm allowed, with Facebook being particularly wonderful, but the way my day with technology has been going today, that might not be a thing. Can't see you at the moment. I'll hop back in shortly to see if I can catch up with those comments in a few minutes instead. So I've popped a link in the video description today so that you can grab a hold of your very own mini mix in Lemon Yellow Sun. Absolutely rammed to the top as per usual for Jessie James Beads, with a glorious collection of both metallic beads, crystal beads. There's a couple of little gemstones in there. There's a crackle agate in there as well. Really, really beautiful. And these features are gorgeous as well. These little crystal encapsulated in a wire housing. I particularly enjoy from this mix, and I know it's very, very small and tiny, but these beads, which are part polish, part faceted, And on those facets, you've got a very, very high polish. And then on the non-faceted zones, you've got this, it's like a buff finish. But not only do you have this two textures on the one bead, you've also got an iridescent nature. Hopefully you can see that little bit of peacock or AB shimmer over the top, a little bit like an aurora borealis. Make sure that you've commented on the Instagram on the Instagram page to try and win your Aurora Borealis mix as well. I think that closed out either last night or possibly today. Just leave a comment, leave some love for that beautiful bead mix, and you could be in a chance with winning one. So that's our lemon yellow sun. I'm going to check again to see if I can catch up with you now. Let's have a gander and see if we can find some comments. Hello everyone from Sandy. Elena is in. We're having some shares of a different class. Susan, hello to you from sunny California. This bead mix is just for you then, my darling. Rosanna, 10 a.m. in Montana. Good morning to you, my lovely. Nobody knows what day it is, even so it's all good. Well, now it's Saturday, the 12th of March. There you go. I can be useful. Hello from Detroit, says Brooke. Danielle is in. Good evening from Bolton. Hello to you. Is that Lancashire? Sherry is in. Good afternoon. Donna's in from Texas. Teresa's in from a rainy Tampa. New York is in with Helena. Looks beautiful. Thank you so much. The mix is amazing. Elvia's in from Arizona. Robin Rose, good morning. Esperanza, good afternoon to you. Teresa, the sunshine is in your beads now because it's raining in Tampa. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And hello from snowy Pennsylvania. Well, we've got our bead mix to work up today. The wires that I'm going to add in, let me just chat to you about those briefly. So usually what I like to do is make in the best colour for the bead mix, and because this is such an effervescent colourway, I think that silver coloured wire is the way to go, and we're going to be using 18 gauge, perhaps a little 20 gauge, and then some. Are we going to use any finer gauge? Yeah, we're just going to use a tiny bit of 26 gauge. Even so, you can alternate these smaller gauges out if you need to. So if you don't have 26, 24 will work here and here. The main frame we're going to make in 18 gauge. What I like to do is demonstrate for you in a copper wire. Now, it's not just because I really love copper with everything. It's one of my favourite metals to work with. Let me just give that a bit of a shake to get that to sit down neatly. It also shows up slightly better on the camera than the silver does. And it doesn't matter what colour background I put in, the copper is the way to go for showing you how to work these pieces up. So I'm just going to remove a few of these items. Give you one last look at the whole tub of gorgeousness. There's a link in the description to Jessie James beads for your lemon yellow sun mix. And I'll show you that again before I leave you today. I'm just going to pop my little heart-shaped dish out of the way just a little bit because we'll be using those beads, and this is the piece that we're going to work up. So there are a couple of techniques to look at. The first technique is one that you may have seen before, which is a double-ended wrapped loop connector. Now I love this for adding detail and drama because it means you can put whichever beads will fit onto your wire, but you can also add something hanging down the bottom, and whether that's just a tiny charm, you could use a head pin to link a small bead on, but these gorgeous, gorgeous tassels are absolutely perfect for the job. So I'm going to pop this back on the geometry and take it out of the way for now. And we're going to kick off and make some jewellery together because that is what I love to do. So I have around about 18 inches of wire at the moment, which is far more than we need. But when I'm working with a great big long strand of wire like this, and again it's 18 gauge round, 18 or so inches, what I'm going to do is start at one end and then just trim away as we need to. So we're going to try and minimise wastage as much as we can. So I'm going to warm the first couple of inches of this wire or so. Warming your wire is an absolute must. It really will make it work so much better for you. It will be just a pleasure if you haven't done that before. So I think we're going to make one or two of the dangly pieces just to show you whichever beads you choose. It's going to look fantastic. So I want to make another one of these. Let's have one of those lined up. And I think we'll team it with one of these gorgeous almost antiqued gold colour saucer beads. It's almost like a beautiful lamp, almost like a paper Chinese lamp perhaps. In addition to this, I'm going to add in one of those bead caps. You don't have to have bead caps on the bottom, the design doesn't necessitate it, but I think it looks kind of cute. So we're also going to choose which of those tassels we're going to use, and I think I'm going to work with the lovely feisty metallic one with those really sumptuous gold threads coming away at the base. So what we're going to do is thread from the top of our design downwards. So at the top of the design, if I say that we're going to recreate a piece like this, the first one that we're going to put on is that lovely antiqued gold spacer. If it doesn't go on your 18 gauge wire, you can simply use 20 gauge wire. I'm just going to very, very quickly check in to see if there are any questions. Snow in Springfield, Tennessee. Sorry to hear that. I hope it's not too destructive for you. Charlene is in from Florida. Snowy in western North Carolina. That was a bit of a mouthful. Thank you, Erica. Donna is in from Michigan. Patty's from Ohio. Esperanza, I don't speak English, but I understand something. You're doing better than I can. I no hablo español, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Frontera, Colombia. I love the Colombian accent. It's one of my favourite accents of the whole world. Starting at the top of the design, we're going to add our first bead in. I'm going to add one of these really beautiful, faceted, very, very angular. I adore Art Deco designs. And again, what you'll see with this bead is that some of your facets, this again has the Aurora Borealis coating on it. One of your facets is a smooth polish with the AB coating. And then the other is this matte buff polish. Absolutely magnificent design. Possibly one of my favourite crystals from Jessie James beads so far, and that's saying something as I have many. We're going to finish off at the base of this segment with a bead cap. You don't have to use the bead cap. If you've run out, you don't absolutely positively have to have them. There's no problem at all. So what we're going to do is turn a right angle, probably around about 1.25 inches from the end. So I'm going to pop in with my flat facing pliers. These are my bent chain nose. Put a right angle on the design. So if I turn that sideways, you can see that's a right angle. And I'm just going to support those beads out of the way for a hot second whilst I come in with my round nose pliers. Let's just bodge things out of the way for a second before I do Rosanna and my favourite thing, which is to knock it flying onto the floor. Rotate around just past that angle with your round nose pliers so that you get this almost shepherd's crook like shape, and then draw that tail all the way around so that you have a mostly circular form. You can obviously do that without a camera a couple of inches above your work. You can get that as round as you need it to. One thing I would say is make sure that it's a reasonable size, because before we finish wrapping our loop, we're going to add in one of those tassels. So let's just slide that past the point where it crosses over. Get that to sit down into the base of the design. Sometimes you just need to open that out to allow it to go round the corner before you bring that back. So we've simply added the tassel at this stage into that loop, and we're going to finish by wrapping that up. So I'm going to grip across that round shape. I'm not pressing down where the wires cross. I'm not pressing down where the wire is holding that lovely tassel. So I'm going to bring that tail all the way around. Now, if you wish to, you can count the number of coils that you make. As I'm wrapping around, I've got 2 coils here. And I think we're going to trim away and leave it at 2 coils. You can match that top and bottom if you wish to. However, as long as if you're making 2 that are the same, for instance, if you use this technique to make earrings, it would be preferable, I'm just trimming that away and capturing it with my pliers. Into the scrap pot it goes. Knock the camera on the way, of course. If you're making matched sections, for instance, in the overall piece that we're making, you've got the outer 2, which are the same. So I would count to make sure I had 2 wraps at the bottom, 2 wraps at the bottom. If you're making an individual one, like the central one is a solo design, there isn't another one of those. It doesn't really matter whether there's 2 wraps or 3 wraps. It's only if you're craving symmetry that you need to count those coils. Otherwise, what we need to do is make sure that that coil end is nice and neat and tidy. A little bit of a squish, a little bit of a squeeze, tidy those coils up, flip the design over and make sure that you're happy with how neat those coils sit on the central bead wire. So I'm just going to straighten that up slightly and push the other beads down to the base so that the outside of your bead, or the outside of your bead cap, is sitting against the base of those coils. So what we're going to do now is create exactly the same design up at the top, so another wrapped loop. The ideal world, what we're going to do is estimate the distance from the end of the coil to the point where it joins the circular form. So if you were to measure that, say use a position on your pliers and say that's about how far that is, pop that same position in before creating another right angle. Now I'm going to keep those right angles in the same orientation. If you wish to, you can have them in the opposite orientation. What will happen is it will look slightly different depending on how you add it into your chandelier frame later. So if I drop this back in for a second, what you'll see with this section that I created earlier is that my loop at the bottom is sideways, so it sits flush to the desk. The loop at the top sits opposite to the desk, so it's at 90 degrees to the desk because it wants to go through that loop. However, if you don't manage to do that and you have both of the loops sitting in the same direction, you'll simply see the front of the loop down at the base. Because your tassels are 3D, they're beautiful all the way around because they've got these little bell caps. It doesn't matter which way you do it. Again, I would say try to aim for symmetry if you can. So we're going to do the repeat process now. I'm going to flip this design over, pop my round to nose pliers into position and create a circular form. Take that all the way around. Now you can have a slightly smaller loop shape up at the top if you wish to, purely because we are putting the top of this section into another round form using the same wire. It needed to be slightly wider at the base to accommodate the bell cap of your tassel. When you're popping it through a wire loop that you're in control of creating, it's slightly less important. Rosanna says, as I always say, you're not working if you don't drop something on the floor. Yep, absolutely. You're not trying hard enough. So what I'm going to do now is just line these loops up. So again, this is actually at 90 degrees to the first loop down at the base, so it will be the same as the piece on the board. But if you get them so that they're lined up in the same direction, it really doesn't matter. Now I'm just going to loop the wire around. I'm working with a very long tail of wire right now. If you cut this slightly shorter, it's just a little bit easier. So there are 3 wraps up at the top. So I obviously slightly mismeasured. Now as long as you get the same mismeasurement when you're making your second one, if you're matching them, all is good. It doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to tidy the end of that coil of wire up, and I'm just going to drop that down at the board. I'll just pop my wire down for a second. Now even though these are different colours, it's all fine because we're just going to demonstrate with these pieces today. So I'm just going to straighten that loop up. It was sat slightly over on the wonk. That's not an official technical term, but it is a technical term that I use all the time. Just means it was not in the correct orientation for me. So you can play with that until it sits exactly as you'd like it to. So we've got a couple of double wrapped loop connectors to work with now. The next thing that we're going to do is to make the central section. So obviously for this design, I've got 3 loops, which works really well with the Briolette cut on this crystal that sits in the main section of our beautiful fantasy pendant. So if you want to recreate that design, you'll need to have 3 of these. So you could use one of those for your central drop, or you could go for a completely different blend of beads, as I did on the outer drops in the demonstration piece, which was these lovely ones, and then combined that with one of the suede or suedette tassels down at the bottom. So you've got lots of choices with how you can make this the same technique but completely unique to you. So whichever way you want to go with that, it's all good. So I'm going to pop those back out of the way for a second. This is the next piece that we're going to work on, which represents this section here. So there are two ways that you can connect your double wrapped loop charm sections or connector sections into the chandelier frame that we're going to make next. The first way is to make your life super easy and simply use a jump ring to connect the two sections together. If you don't want to use a jump ring, I'm going to show you now how you can load each of these loops as we go with one of your connecting charm drop sections. So I just need to get this back out of the way, otherwise it's definitely going to go on the floor. So huggles to Jessica as well as everyone else. If you're just joining us, we've just learnt how to create a double wrapped loop connector, and we made the lower loop slightly larger so we could access having one of the beautiful tassels down in the bottom. You don't have to use a tassel, you could absolutely go for like a head pin or an eye pin or something and just create your own charm, but I really like the tassels that come in this bead mix. So I'm going to pop you back down to the board and we'll learn that chandelier central section together now. Again, I'm just going to pop that out of the way so I don't wang it onto the floor, which is always something of a risk with me. So just pop those up to one side. We will be utilising those in a minute to add in. There's our feature section, a beautiful Briolette style bead. Let's have a look. That does have a coating. It's almost like a topaz colour over white crystal, and it's got a really good drill hole. Now I believe that I used 22 gauge to set this into the piece, but it's going to work if you use 22. You might even get 20 gauge through, you never know, give it a shot. Or you could use 26 gauge. Whichever you have available, just to add this in, will work perfectly fine. So we're not going to overly worry about that. What we are going to do is re-warm our wire. Where I was using this section earlier to coil around the upright section of the top wrapped loop, it's had a little bit of work hardening. So again, I'm just going to run that between thumb and forefinger. Get that really, really hot. There is a scientific explanation to do with exciting electrons, but I am not that clever. All I know is if I warm the wire, it behaves much more nicely for me, and the finish on my jewellery is much smoother and more beautiful too. So I have the residual amount from that 18 or so inches. Again, this is probably more than we need, but I'm trying to be a little bit thrifty with wire. So I've warmed this section, which now sits at about 12 to 14 inches or so in length. And what we're going to do is take the round nose pliers and create the first loop in the centre of the wire that we have available. If you're cutting smaller sections, probably 12 inches will be more than sufficient. So let's pop those pliers in, and we're going to create a centralised loop. So if I just turn that over so that you can see, hopefully that will make sense. And what I'm creating is almost a teardrop loop down at the bottom. It's not completely round because we don't have a flat baseline. Let me just smooth those out for a second. Literally did just stab myself in the fingertip. All is well. So I have right down at the centre. Now if I just bring the demonstration piece in for a moment, you can see that there's an angle which creates this beautiful, almost bell-shaped chandelier. And that's where we are at the moment. We're at the very, very base of the chandelier section. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to make a very, very quick charm to sit in the centre so that we have something to demonstrate with. And I'm going to break the mould and make something on the fly. I've got a couple of inches of wire here, about 5 inches. And I'm just going to create a little loop coil down at the base. Spin that around. So I've got a small circular form going on. And I'm going to make a large disc with this. And instead of stopping at 2 rotations from the end, we're going to go for a 3rd rotation. So another section of wire is cascading all the way around the outside edge. And I'm not afraid to put quite a lot of pressure on that. I want that to stay flat. So we've gone once around, twice around, 3 times around. If I flip this over, pop my fine bent chain nose pliers underneath, and I'm just going to turn that. If you tell the wire what you want it to do after you've warmed it, it should be quite accommodating. So I'm just going to smooth and straighten this central section before randomly picking a bead. Oh, I've dived in I'm going for another one of these just because they're so very delicious and I love them. And I think we're going to top that with, let's see if this goes on. I think it just might. There we go. So we've made a very, very quick drop. On this one, instead of having one of the tassels, I've just put a loop, and we're going to create now a little wrapped loop up at the top. So push the wire forwards and away, and then pop back in with those round nose pliers, rotate around, draw the tail back and underneath that loop shape. Hold the circular form whilst you wrap the tail around. Let me just move that out of the way so you can't see that behind. I think we might get 3 little turns of wire before we just tighten that up. And then I'm going to trim away the end section. And now there's enough wire in this, it's about 1 inch and a little bit. That will be useful for something, so I'm keeping that in my scrap pot for later. Just going to tidy up that last little bit of wire so that it's nice and neat and tidy. You do need to be respectful when you're working with beads, whether they be glass or gemstone, that you're not going to scratch or hurt them. And again, we have that opposition of loop. Although we don't have a wrapped loop down at the base with a tassel, we just have a coil. My hanging loop at the top is in opposition, so flat to the table, opposite to the table at 90 degrees. So there's my 3 pieces that we're going to hang from the chandelier. So this is going to look quite unusual because the middle drop is shorter, whereas on my demonstration piece, by the very nature of it sitting at the centre, it's ever so slightly longer. So you can play around with bead length and how that looks whenever you wish to. So we've created a little teardrop shape or a pear drop shape loop in the wire down at the base. And what we're going to do is put our most central drop section onto the wire at one end. Follow that all the way around and just sit that down into position. Now before I go any further, what I like to do is just strengthen about 1/4 of an inch of the wire coming away from that pear drop shape in the wire, like so. And I'm just opening and closing the pliers on the single sections of wire to add a little bit of residual strength. And you'll see now that that means I've set the shape and I've set the wire. So the next thing we're going to do is add another 2 loops on either side. If I pop the piece down on the board for a second and I borrow my bent chain nose pliers, I'm going to add a loop here and then approximately the same distance away on the other side, another loop here. So we're just going to use the round nose pliers for that. Pop the round nose pliers on the wire and start to turn that around. And then I'm just going to draw the tail of the wire up like so, so that I can see that where that's going to sit. What I need to do now is add the same loop on the other side. Bit of fluff, sorry, let's get rid of that. So you could make that slightly smaller if you wanted to. The main aspect of this part of the design is that we're looking for symmetry. So I'm just going to smooth that section of wire a little bit, it's getting tense. Flip the design over. I just have to move it out of the way so it doesn't hit the camera. Exactly the same thing with the pliers, round nose pliers. Now you should be able to see, if I tilt it like so, that my wire travels from the centre out, and then when it does the loop it goes underneath. So it travels all the way around and then underneath itself on the way back. I like to have those the same on both sides when I'm making chandeliers. So I'm taking the tail of the wire all the way around and I'm going to make sure that it goes underneath again. So I just hold that in position. If you find that you have made one loop much larger than the other, as I have done here, what you can do is just close that up slightly and then draw the wire across. It doesn't take much at this stage to try and get that a little bit more symmetrical. Draw that wire back sideways like so. Let me get some pliers out of the way. Once you're happy with how those sit in your basic chandelier form, you can give the loop section a small squeeze. Just the loop section, just the outside, not where the wires cross over. Flip. What I might do before I set that form is just open that loop out slightly so it's a little bit more like the other one, and then give that a tiny squeeze. I'm just going to check in with Facebook on Jessie James Beads just to make sure that there are questions. Love your necklace. Thank you so much, Susan. That's very, very kind. Trudy, phew, made it, almost missed you. I'll have to watch from the beginning later. Thank you, my darling. Cindy says, I'd never heard of warming your wire, what a great tip. And Paula says, good morning all. Now Cindy, it's the single most useful aspect of working with wire that I can give you. Learning to make a wrapped loop is key, but warming your wire and having tools that are decent, but they don't have to be expensive. For instance, these bent chain nose pliers I bought in a set about 8 or 9 years ago, and they're still going because they've got a nice box joint in them. These from Bead are very inexpensive but very serviceable round nose. They also come in chain nose. Having flush cutters is an absolute must if you're going to make jewellery to sell, because it means when you trim away at the end, like I'll just demonstrate here, give that a bit of a click, just get that last bit away. It means that you're much less likely to have issues with those end sections. So getting some reasonable tools, but warming that wire is key. So what we're going to do next is sit our gorgeous Briolette crystal. I want to call it almost like a topaz coating, topaz colour coating. It's a crystal, not a topaz. And what I'm going to do now is just make the central section as symmetrical as I possibly can, and then set that wire shape. So give those a little bit of a squeeze just between the flat faces of your pliers and never where the wire crosses over. Once you're happy with that shape and form, we're going to add on the 2 other drops that we made earlier. So if I pop that over to one side. Now, if you find this particularly tricky or demanding, what you can do is simply use a jump ring instead. But I want to show you how to make this in one piece, like so. It isn't tricky, but when you're setting your Briolette shaped crystal in a second, it's more annoying than difficult. So let's slide that down into position so that you have your chandelier setting. Now, chandelier earrings are fabulous, but I think this as a pendant is really, really delightful. So obviously you can see I made one the other day in silver wire, and I'm working with copper because it simply shows up on the screen. It's so much better. So I tend to use bail making pliers to make consistent loops. Yes, I don't have my 2 size bail makers, but I do have my Bead 6-step bail makers. To create loops that are always the same size, you have a couple of options. If you have bail makers, just remember which number you use. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 in sizes that graduate upwards. If you don't have bail makers, your round nose pliers can be marked with a marker pen, and that will give you the ability to just use the same size over and over again. And you can use that for the loops, for starting off your coils, whatever you feel that you might need. Okay, so let's get back to our tutorial. We're going to set the Briolette after we've closed the top section up. What you do need to do is make sure that the central segment is the right size for you. I actually really enjoy negative space in jewellery. So what you'll see when this is worn on the décolletage is a little bit of skin, which I think is really, really attractive. If you want to size that down, you can certainly bring those 2 side wires closer together. And if you imagine a straight line that goes up through your central piece, all the way through the central loop at the base, it needs to continue in a straight line. So you could use a straight edge, a ruler for that. What we're looking for is to have space for your Briolette to sit. So that also looks nice. You'll still get an element of negative space visible through the wire and the beads. But before we set that Briolette, what we're going to do is fix that point up at the top. So I'm going to grab hold of the wire on the right hand side, and I'm going to push the extended tail at the point where I want those 2 wires to cross over. One of the wires, in this instance it comes from the right, is going to continue in a straight line as if it's going up to 12 o'clock. The second wire I want to go across, it will either be to 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whichever one you did first. So we've got a bend coming over to the right now. And what we're going to do next is wrap this tail of wire 2 or 3 times around that core. Now if I flip the design over, I'm going to show you a way that you can stop this section becoming much smaller. What will happen when you start taking this tail of wire around the core if I was just to start winding now, what can happen is that it will eat the design. That sounds crazy, but it's true. This section of wire will start getting pulled into the wrapping. We want to prevent that because we want to keep the angles that we've chosen. So what I'm going to do is hold that into position, use my pliers to hold those two side by side. I'm not pressing down where any wires cross over. What I'm going to do is take that tail around the back, and you can see we've started wrapping a coil around the central section. So if I hold that again, we're just going to bring that tail, whoops-a-daisy, all the way around until we start creating a coil around that central core wire. And what we're looking to do is prevent the sizes from changing. If that wraps over itself, you can just give that a bit of a squish and a squeeze. It's always a challenge when the camera's right in the way. So I'm going to grip that again for the third time and just finish off with my last coil of this section. So give that a nice flatten down, and I'm very, very gently coercing these coils into position and then just straightening the design up, doing any fixing I need to do if I've accidentally mashed those wires. So let's just give that one last tidy before we add in the next section of the tutorial. So I'm going to use one of these beautiful, if I can find him, there he is. It's the most buttery, rich gold colour, and I don't know what you'd call it. It's a flat, textured, it's a spacer bead, I don't know what it is. I think it's delightful. It's a beautiful gold colour. So this is going to go on that upright that comes away at 12 o'clock from your chandelier. And I'm just going to slide that down into position. So take the tail from the wire that wrapped around the core out to the side. And what I'm going to do is just turn it all through 90 degrees so it's on its side for the time being. You can see the design in its progress. So you've got matched tassels, albeit this one's in silver. I might fix that later, I might not. I might just go quirky. And what I'm going to do now is take this tail of wire and give it just a moment of warmth. I want it to be nice and smooth and fluid. And I'm going to take that tail of wire, it's sitting on top of the core at the moment. I'm going to take that all the way around, and I think I might go to the top of that core wire. So I'm just going to use the bead itself to create a nice, smooth, round, arcing shape before I push very, very firmly onto the bead and the wire, draw that tail around, one time only. And then again, we're going to add a little bit more warmth to the design. Little bit more warmth, and then we're going to bring that tail all the way back around, like so that you create this halo effect around that golden spacer. What I'm going to do now is turn the tail around the core that we created a second ago, those coils, and just finish off with a couple of coils around the central section. So I'm just going to do that by hand to begin with. And then when it starts getting tense and it starts making your thumb pads a little bit painful, I'm just going to switch to my bent chain nose pliers to finish the design off, draw that around little by little until that sits as neatly and flatly as you can muster. So let's pop that down for a second and see where we are at. So you've added in your double wrapped loop tasseled sections, or your beaded charm, whatever you wanted to do down at the bottom. And you've got your chandelier set. So now we need to do a little wrapped loop up at the top. So I'm going to come up from the space that we made the halo shape, just a small distance, the distance of my pliers, and push the wire forwards and away. And what we're going to do now is use some round nose pliers to create a bail. You could, of course, use your bail making pliers. There are some beautiful bail makers on the Jessie James Beads website which are two size. One side is slightly smaller than the other, and they're very, very useful. I just don't have any at the moment. So I'm going to use my round nose pliers, but I would encourage you to get some bail makers if you're able to. I can show you how, using round nose pliers. I'm going to make a round form that is much larger than the round nose pliers, and 50% of this is down to warming your wire. You see how the larger size of my pliers is nowhere near the size of the circular form that we've made. That's just down to having warm wire and asking it politely with your round nose pliers. So I'm going to whiz this around now in a couple of loops. You can add on a coil at the front if you want to, but I'm going to cut that short. Take the tail all the way round. The tighter you make your coils, the neater the finished effect will look, but obviously you will have a little bit more time, and I don't want to go over the same technique 70 bajillion times. So I'm just going to bring that to the back, cut the correct piece of wire. Always pays to look twice and cut once. And then you can see we've got a little sticky uppy bit of wire. So to get that tucked away, we're going to rotate the pliers around that wrapped core. Just get that to sit down smartly. And that's the main process that we've worked together to create. Again, you can do whatever bead order you feel like. So we're going to add on our Briolette. Now I think 20 gauge goes through this, but I will just double check as I may have had a different gauge. 20 gauge does fit on that, but I feel that perhaps a different gauge would be better. Yeah, maybe 22, because 22 is just a little bit stronger, but it's also a little bit finer. So for this piece, I'm actually going to use 22 gauge. You could use anything from 20 up to 26 gauge. And what I'm going to do is decide whereabouts I want the Briolette to sit in my frame. So that's quite close up to the top. I'm going to remember where I can see that drill aperture formed through the crystal. I'm going to remember where that sits. I'm going to lay the wire, and this is only about 4 inches of wire, over the surface of the design. It only needs to be about ½ an inch or so, and I'm just going to take that tail away. You can use your pliers if you find it easier, just to create a little bit of a coil. Now it needs at least 3 turns. The lighter your gauge of wrapping wire, the more you will need to coil around the frame, and that is simply because it is weaker. The stronger your wire, the less coils you will need. But even if you use a super strong wire, the strongest wire you can get through there would be that 20 gauge, I imagine. You'll still want at least 3 or 4 turns. So I've gone for 4 turns, and again, this was the 22 gauge. So I'm just going to sit that sideways now. We're going to grab the end of the wire we've just attached. I'm going to slide that up through the drill hole and down into position. Now, the end of the wire is over the surface of the frame on the right hand side, so we want to take it to the surface of the frame on the left hand side to match. Another thing to note when you're trying to make symmetrical jewellery, especially if you're looking to sell, is that our coil comes downwards from the tip of the bead. So rather than taking the tail and bringing it upwards where you'll end up with a very quirky asymmetric look, we're going to take the wire downwards around that frame. So I'm just going to draw the tail around, and it's a slightly heavier wire than one would normally weave with, so you may need to just give it a little bit of a coerce to get it to go nice and neatly and tidily. Now you'll notice when I'm using my pliers very near to a crystal, I'm using the curved side. It's much smoother, much less dangerous than smashing or scratching your beautiful, beautiful crystals. So I'm just going to flip this over to the back, allow the crystal to drop out of position so you can see what we're going to do. I'm going to spin the tail around and give that 4 good wraps so it matches the first side. So this is our 3rd wrap now. Push that up into position, bring that across the back. Now we want the very end of that wire to truncate inside the frame. So again, look twice before you cut once, and then we can just chase the tail away. Get those coils nice and neat and tidy, and just pop that down on the board so we can assess what it is we have done so far. One of the reasons that using jump rings is less favourable is because jump rings can come open unless you solder them. One of the things about using jump rings which is more favourable is that these sections are less likely to twist. So you could even add these to bits of chain and have them hanging much further away from your chandelier. That is a really cool design, actually, to add chain into your designs. Let me just check to see if there are any questions. Let me have a look. Such a beautiful design, so elegant, says Joy. Thank you so much. Good tip about using the curve. Bless you, Sue. Thank you very, very much for all of your kindness and for hanging out with me here today at Jessie James Beads. So for the very, very last section of our tutorial, I can speak the English. I can, just not all the time, always. So if you wanted to add some little small beads up at the top to add even more vivacity, the colour on these is magnificent. I'm just going to show you a very, very simple technique. I'm not going to complete the whole thing, but I'm sure I've got a handful of those tidgy beads left. There's one. See if I can chase this other one. No, it's gone to the bottom of the pot. Because if you were a tiny bead, why wouldn't you go to the bottom of the pot? Hold on. Let's upend the lot. It's a good excuse to have a look at the rest of these beads. They're beautiful. So let's just look through the pot. Matte buff and highly polished. These gorgeous little sweetie-like treated glass beads. You've got caged crystals in the Marquise effect, albeit it's around brilliant. You've got these funky little diamonds of gold. You've got crystal cages as well. You've got yellow and orange dragon's vein agate, or crab agate if you prefer. There are spaces, there are tidgy beads. There's another tidgy bead, that's what we wanted. Crystal spacers. Let's have a look. So much more than I've even begun to tell you about. These are gorgeous as well. Who doesn't love a faceted rondelle in AB crystal? So let's pop those back into the tub. Your Lemon Yellow Sun collection is a mini mix. There's nothing mini about the punch of colour. So I've got a little tail left of that 22 gauge wire. And I think that's going to be long enough to recreate this little halo up at the top of the pendant. And what I like to do, to play around with people's minds sometimes, is to pretend that a bail isn't a bail. Sometimes I like to put a coil over it so it looks like the design is floating beneath a coil of wire. And sometimes I like to add some beads. Now, I don't have enough beads to do the full tutorial, but it's enough to give you an idea of how to achieve it if you wish to. So there's only about 4 inches of wire here to work with. I think if I hold that the other way around, it might be slightly easier to show you. So I've got about 3/4 of an inch hanging out one side, and I'm just going to run that around the coil that we created above that buttery gold, and just get that to grip really firmly into the gaps made by the wire that is larger than this. It's 18 gauge in the centre there, and just get that smaller gauge wire to sit inside those grooves. So that has now bitten onto the design really nicely. What I'm going to do is smooth that wire to make it as fluid as possible. And I'm now going to spend at least 16 hours putting small beads on, because my eyes, they're not quite what they used to be quite honest. But I am going to put 4 of them onto the wire to just show you the idea. 8 would be ideal, because that would mean that you could add a really nice pop of colour over the surface of that bail. So what I did was I just shaped the wire around so it sits over the top of the bail before drawing it all the way back around, and I'd add another 4 beads onto the second side. I'm just going to pinch that to allow me to recreate that shape. And then what I'm going to do is pinch the whole thing into position before bringing that tail around and circling around that central core, as we did a moment ago with the other end of the wire. And with that, I think it's about 4 inches maybe of that 22 gauge, which is equivalent to 0.6. I'm just going to smooth that into position and snuggle it down inside the grooves made by the heavier wire. So although I didn't have enough beads to complete this design, when you add the beads onto the wire, it makes that arc much more smoothly. So if I just put these two side by side, you can see that we've made something similar yet different, and that's one of the reasons I love teaching here with Jessie James Beads, whether it be here on Facebook or later on YouTube or on the blog, because I can give you a technique which you can then run away with and make something that's completely different but uses really useful wire techniques. This is me. If we've not met before, my name is Jem. I live in England, right slap bang in the middle. I'm looking forward to spring already. Today we have worked with your Lemon Yellow Sun mini bead mix by Jessie James. I hope that you've enjoyed today's tutorial. I've absolutely loved being here with you. I'm going to be around in the comments now for a few minutes to cover any questions. If there is anything that you need to know, please do ask. You can always @ me in the comments down there. It's Jem Europe Hawks or something very, very similar to that. I can't even remember what the name is, but you will see me in the comments, and if you need any assistance with today's tutorial, just shout at me and I will do my best to help. I'm hoping to be back with you again very, very soon. Don't forget, daylight savings time. It's coming at you. It's not coming here for another 2 weeks, but we'll all work it out in the end. Have yourself a very beautiful remainder of your Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye for now.